This last week, two researchers at Cornell University published a very interesting paper on a potentially new and different attack that miners could use on the blockchain in order to gain a competitive advantage against other miners. Now, we've already heard and discussed, I think, ad nauseum, the concept of a 51% attack, being able to take over the blockchain for many consecutive blocks by marshalling 51% of the hashing power of the network. What this paper talks about is essentially a shortcut that allows you to achieve the same thing, to achieve a predominance of the blocks mined coming to you, and do that with far less effort than 51% of the hashing, as low as potentially 28, 29%. Some have said even lower, maybe as low as 25% of the hashing power, in order to execute an attack called selfish mining. So this paper was posted and has received a ton of discussion. Obviously, it generated both some very sensible and great analytical discussion and food for thought among the developers. And it also generated a mountain of screaming sensationalist, Bitcoin is broken, my hair is on fire, we should all sell kind of articles. Let's talk about it.
Hey guys, before we start talking about this, I have some breaking news. Breaking news. The US dollar is broken. There's a group of people who can just print more at any given time on any whim, and they set the interest rates and they decide how much money is printed. Guess what? You can't really do much with it. You have to ask people's permission to get it in and out of a bank. You can't really take it across borders. Gosh, I think we should all sell our dollars.
That's a really great point, Stephanie. The absolute worst case, edge case scenario of improbable Bitcoin failure is that it becomes as useless as the dollar in terms of control, distribution of the power of control behind it. So in that worst case scenario, it would take 25% of the hashing power in order to take over the currency, whereas for the dollar, all you need is one chairmanship at the Federal Reserve. Which is appointed. So there we go.
Yeah, but I mean, it's appointed, but, at the same time, maybe that's a less scary outcome, because at least then who's doing the manipulation, as opposed to there being the potential for lots of people to do the manipulation, although albeit one at a time.
Very good point. I will just bat this whole theory away very, very quickly like this. This is a theoretical construct. It is absolutely fascinating from an academic perspective, and there's already a lot of discussion around how we can prevent the possibility of such a concerted effort. However, in practical terms, you cannot simulate the Bitcoin network the way they have simulated in the paper and draw rational conclusions, because it ignores a lot of the incentives that miners have not to kill the goose that lays golden eggs, which is their mining capability, especially if they've invested in hardware. And secondly, right now, the big motivation to be part of a pool is because you can get ready access to a lot of the mining capacity and services and more equitably share. But the more people who have ASICs, the less important pools are. So this is a highly theoretical issue that's generating a lot of academic discussion, but in practical terms, pulling such a thing off is almost impossible. Pulling it off without notice is impossible, and there are already countermeasures in place. So Bitcoin is not broken. Bitcoin is understood a bit better now.
Andreas, can you just back up for a minute and break it down for me? How exactly would somebody with perhaps a mining pool or a huge botnet or something, how would somebody with 25% of the network hashing power gain control over the network? Is this like they would use that 25% to do a 51% attack?
No,
Explain this to me.
Yes, absolutely. So a 51% attack is where you use the hashing power of the network in order to mine blocks in such a way as to control who is on the correct blockchain. If you can dominate the blockchain, you can essentially double spend for a period of time or do various other shenanigans like that. It's a risky strategy that probably won't work in the long term. Now, with selfish mining, what the authors are suggesting is that if you discover a block, when you discover a block, the search for the next block after that, n+1 if you like, hinges on the block you just discovered. Now, if you don't tell anyone about the block you just discovered and just immediately go on to searching for n+1, you're the only one who can search for the n+1 block because you know the nth block. And if you have sufficient power, you could even go 2 or 3 blocks ahead of the chain. Once you've gone that far, then you can release your block. So what you're doing is you're selfishly limiting the propagation of blocks you discover so that you can gain an advantage on the following blocks after that and then release them all in one big rush when you've discovered several in the future. Essentially, not propagating blocks to the network when you find them gives you an advantage that you can translate into essentially a hashing attack. But here's the problem with this. In this paper, and in general an analysis of this, we look at the reward as if it's multiplied by probability. So if you find the block, right, and publish it immediately, you get 100% of the reward. And then for every second that passes that you're not publishing that block, the probability of someone else publishing another block and stealing your lead increases. So your reward probabilistically goes down to 0, right? And that's how they've modeled this whole thing. Here's the problem, though. You can't get half a reward. You either get it or you don't. So selfish mining depends on a rather risky strategy that would be easily discovered that has the possibility of destroying faith in the currency. It would take a stupid miner, a stupid network that doesn't react, to go against all of the incentives of the Bitcoin mining scheme to do it. So again, I think it is a very rare edge case. It's very interesting from a theoretical perspective. It means almost nothing from a practical perspective at this point.
Well, I don't think that was entirely it, though, was it, Andreas? You're right about the part that you explained, but I thought that the reason why having that blockchain that you're essentially keeping private to yourself is that if you can get a few blocks ahead and then release those, essentially you incentivize everyone else to jump onto your blockchain, which you're now several ahead of, right?
Oh, of course, yes. Oh, no, it's not incentivizing. If you release a blockchain that's 1 block ahead, then that is the current blockchain. If you release one that's 2 blocks ahead, not only is that the current one, but the possibility of someone else catching up with you is even lower because they have to mine 2 blocks in sequence. And at 3 blocks, you're really way ahead of the curve. So when you do release that, your chain will become the dominant chain. So essentially, you're able to do the same thing you would do under a 51% hash attack by simply mining the next n blocks in a row yourself without needing anybody else's help and dominating the network. But you're doing it by hiding the fact that you just mined some blocks and building on that success, essentially doubling down on the hidden block you didn't publish, and going a bit further, going for 2 blocks in a row, going for 3 blocks in a row. And the bigger that bet, the lower the probability you'll succeed, because all it takes is 1 block from someone else and you're out of the game.
Okay, so let's assume for a second that someone is able to pull this off and say they get 3 blocks ahead, and then the network switches over to them. Doesn't the network stay on that chain, which has been co-opted? I mean, does that matter?
It doesn't matter, because at that point, the miner has already made the gains. They've been able to get 3 rewards in a row, and their second and third reward for the second and third block they mined on top of a block they didn't tell anyone about, so they didn't have any competition because no one was searching to extend that chain because they didn't know it existed. Essentially, you get further ahead without any competition, and then you dump it all in one go. And instead of locking in 1 block, you've locked in 3 blocks, for example. So it allows you to extend your lead with less hashing power than before. It's a shortcut on the 51% attack. It doesn't give you any more benefits than a 51% attack. It just allows you to take advantage of not publishing blocks in order to gain a slight edge on the other miners.
So who loses in this case? I mean, the other miners.
The other miners.
The other miners. Does anybody else lose? Does this matter to average users of the network at all?
And not in a single instance effort to do this. If this was done consistently, it would break down the incentive structure and the market, leading to miners withdrawing from the market because they can no longer achieve fairness. But that is a rather extreme scenario. That would assume that no one takes any countermeasures. And the discussion that's happening on the Bitcoin dev list is very interesting because you've got many of the core developers looking at this very seriously and also clarifying that you cannot do this without generating a trail of breadcrumbs that show that you did this. And if you do, there will be consequences. Peter Todd talked about how we're screwed on the dev list, and you should see the answer he got from Gavin. I gotta quote it. Because Peter said, look, if anybody wants to try this, here's my PGP key, contact me and I'll help you do it. And his goal for saying that was more as a challenge to the pools. Go ahead, try it, we'll shut you down. But Gavin took it the wrong way, and his response was priceless. He put on his benevolent dictator hat and went nuclear. This was at 8:56 p.m. Quoting Peter's message, P.S. If any large pools want to try this stuff out, give me a shout. You have my PGP key, confidentiality assured. Gavin responds, if I find out one of the large pools decides to run this, quote, experiment, quote, on the main network, I will make it my mission to tell people to switch to a more responsible pool. And if you think you can get away with driving up everybody's orphan rate without anyone noticing, you should think again.
So this is another sort of interesting example of the core dev team not really having any power outside of the ability to talk and be listened to, but being able to kind of bring that power to bear on what otherwise could be, you know, something that people would want to try out. It's very interesting to watch how the dev team has to lead as opposed to other projects.
Right, absolutely. They have no authority other than code. But at the same time, they can write code and they can write code fixes. The trick is that they will have to draw a very, very, very fine line, because no fix you apply here could break the distributed consensus nature. It has to remain decentralized and open, right? If you put a rule that says we don't let pool X participate, or we're going to filter blocks coming from this IP address, you've opened the door to far, far worse things than a selfish mining attack.
Which is, of course, why it's good that Gavin has the benevolent dictator hat, but he doesn't actually have the gavel.
Exactly. And I think people will have to make educated risk assessments as to what's better, the problem or the solution. For now, quite rightly, what they're talking about is, let's gather more data, let's do more simulations, let's figure it out, and let's pay attention to this for the long run. Essentially, what this is new game theory. It's new game theory about the interplay between miners, mining pools, and incentive structures.
Is the Bitcoin price in a bubble? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. Bitcoin video passes are on sale. Normally $75 for those paying in US funds. Visit bitcoinvideopass.com and spend only 0.1 to 0.2 Bitcoins, 0.12 Bitcoins at the time this was recorded, to access all the talks and panels from the October cryptocurrency conference. See how easy buying with Bitcoin can be and experience instant access as soon as you've paid without even reloading the page. Check it out at bitcoinvideopass.com.